On an August afternoon in 1978, the final breath of Hollywood's first empire slipped quietly out of a Beverly Hills room. Inside the mansion he had built like a throne lay Jack Warner. Furniture trimmed with gold, paintings of museum quality, rooms that absorbed footsteps and gave back nothing but silence. Outside, the estate seemed alive. 9 acres of immaculate gardens, tennis courts, a private golf course, fountains still murmuring as if they held secrets. Inside, the atmosphere was thick, as though the house itself was waiting. His wife Anne stayed near, present, poised. Loyal in the manner people become loyal when time has worn every argument into habit. But those who ought to have been there were absent. His brothers were gone. One had died without exchanging another word with Jack after a betrayal so cold it became Hollywood legend. His son, dismissed, fired, exiled, was not beside him. Jack had constructed an empire that created stars, molded America's imagination, and stamped his name across history. Yet at the end, the space around him was occupied by objects, not people. And that mansion, 13,000 square feet of Georgian splendor, polished like a vow, stood as evidence of what he truly prized. Not affection, not reconciliation, not ken. It rose as a monument to ambition without boundaries, achievement without tenderness, triumph without tranquility. A palace, yes, but also a caution. Because to grasp the shadow that clung to those walls, you don't begin in Beverly Hills. You begin far off in the old world, where survival wasn't an aspiration, it was a daily struggle. A tiny village in Eastern Europe, a Jewish family living under perpetual threat. Poverty that didn't merely drain wallets, it exhausted hope. 4 brothers born into a world that could erupt in violence overnight. United by a father's vow and a future none of them could yet imagine. Their father, Benjamin, was a cobbler, hands cracked from leather. Back stooped by labor that appeared never-ending. He nurtured the kind of dream that doesn't gleam, just safety, a roof that doesn't shake, a life where your children can grow without dread trailing them down the street. By 1889, he gathered what meager possessions he could and transported his family across the ocean to America, with little more than stubborn faith. Their name would transform, their world would transform. But the yearning to ascend, faint at first, was already stirring in the sons. They relocated, stumbled, attempted again, stumbled again, kept relocating. Baltimore, Canada, back to America. Finally, Youngstown, Ohio. Steel suit, arduous labor. The sons observed their father wear himself out and still declined to surrender. And they absorbed the first lesson of their new nation in America. You could reinvent yourself if you were prepared to battle as though it were warfare. Among 12 children, 4 brothers would become the driving force of a new industry. Harry, serious, principled, morally unyielding. Albert, quiet, pragmatic, designed for figures and logistics. Sam, the visionary, absorbed by machinery, always envisioning the future before it materialized. And Jack, the youngest, born in 1892. Commission, with a spark that seemed like charisma and later disclosed itself as something more cutting. Jack joked while others labored. Jack spent while others conserved. Jack broke rules as though he couldn't breathe beneath them. But Benjamin made each son swear something sacred. Simple words carrying immense weight: remain united. Never split the family. As long as you stand together, you will be strong. For decades, that vow would endure. Through destitution, through early triumphs, through the first glimmer of moving pictures. And then, slowly, it would fracture. Not because the world assaulted them, not because adversaries overcame them, but because one brother desired more than the rest and he was ready to seize it, and it all commenced almost by chance. In 1903, Sam pooled enough funds for a second-hand projector and a single film print. The Great Train Robbery. He draped a bedsheet in the rear of a shop, charged a nickel, and observed people gasp at the wonder of images shifting in the dark. They returned the following night, and the night after. Sam understood that what he'd discovered wasn't merely entertainment, it was influence. Soon the brothers pooled everything and launched a modest theater in Pennsylvania. 99 seats, one shy of 100, simply to evade fire regulations. Their initial lesson: survive first, apologize never. Harry oversaw operations, Albert managed distribution. Sam handled the equipment, and Jack, scarcely more than a boy, stood outside luring strangers in with songs, jokes, and that innate craving for attention. They weren't just peddling tickets, they were mastering how to command crowds. They advanced from theaters to distribution, from distribution to production, from scraps to a studio. In 1918, Warner Brothers Pictures became tangible on Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood's sun, a new realm unfolding before them. Harry led from the east, Albert directed the funds, Tenda Sam drove the technology, and Jack, who perpetually sought the limelight, assumed control of production. For years they labored, westerns, comedies, serials, anything that could sustain them. Then Sam glimpsed the future once more. He synchronized sound. A perilous system that no one respected, a wager substantial enough to ruin them. And that gamble would render them immortal. But it would also rupture the family. Because when the money flowed, when the power came, when the world finally acknowledged Warner, one brother would cease to hear the vow their father had made them swear. One brother would conclude that the empire outweighed the blood that built it. And decades later, in that silent Beverly Hills room, encircled by gold and ghosts, that decision would be all that remained. Subscribe to Liturgy of Fear, because the brightest empires always cast the deepest shadows. Youngstown, Ohio didn't cultivate dreamers, it cultivated survivors. The Warner boys matured in a world of grit and strain. Steel smoke in the atmosphere. Winter winds slicing through coats never thick enough, and a father who rose wary and returned warier. Benjamin Warner didn't lecture his sons about greatness. He demonstrated what endurance looked like. If a grocery store failed, he opened something else. If a neighborhood shut its doors in his face, he walked to the next street. The boys acquired a severe kind of optimism. Keep moving. Not because you feel assured, but because stopping means vanishing. That's why, when motion pictures arrived like a strange new fever, Sam noticed first, in 1903, a used projector and a solitary film print didn't resemble a revolution, it resembled a plaything. But Sam wasn't designed to see toys, he saw mechanisms, systems, futures. He arranged a screen in the rear of a store with a sheet that still carried the scent of laundry soap. Then he welcomed the neighborhood in and requested a nickel. What occurred next wasn't just entertainment, it was transformation. People sat in the dark and forgot their whereabouts. For a few minutes, their poverty didn't matter. Their exhaustion didn't matter. A flickering train on a sheet was sufficient to make them gasp, laugh, lean forward like believers at a sermon. That nickel, small, harmless, unremarkable, proved something powerful to the Warner brothers. If you control what people watch, you can control what they feel. And if you can do that, you can build anything. They lacked money, but they possessed momentum. The brothers pooled what they could, every saved coin, every favor, every risk, and opened their first genuine theater in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. They dubbed it the Cascade. It held 99 seats, one seat short of 100, because regulations carried costs. And the Warners had learned early that surviving meant bending the world before it bent you. Each brother assumed a role as though it were destiny. Harry, the eldest, became the backbone, serious, principled, obstinate, the type of man who believed respectability counted even when you were bankrupt. Albert became the quiet engine. Numbers, timetables, logistics, a mind constructed for order. Sam became the visionary of the future, projectors, equipment upgrades. Every new invention that might distinguish them from every other small-time exhibitor. And Jack, youngest, sharp, hungry, became the face. He stood outside and executed what the others couldn't. He pulled strangers in, joked, sang, performed, sold the dream with a grin. In those early years, they weren't competing with MGM or Paramount. They were competing with hunger, rent, winter, the next bill. They expanded from theaters into film distribution, purchasing prints, and renting them, negotiating with other theater owners like street merchants, bargaining over survival. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, their operation began to solidify into something larger. Not glamorous, not yet, but tangible. Then came the shift that separates hustlers from empire builders. They stopped merely exhibiting movies and started producing them. Production was gritty and arduous back then. No safety net, no guaranteed audience, no forgiving critics. But the Warners had never required forgiveness, they required leverage. They manufactured pictures on thin budgets, worked fast, learned faster, and expanded their name into spaces the major studios disregarded. For years they lived like men sprinting uphill, carrying a company on their shoulders. And that's where the real divergence between the brothers began to expose itself. Because even when they were impoverished, the family vow still held. They fought, yes, but together. They argued, but the tie stayed intact. They still recalled Benjamin's words like a commandment, never divide the family. The promise functioned like a rope. fraying occasionally, tightening occasionally, but still holding them as they ascended. Yet the same ascent that enriched them also amplified their personalities. Harry's morality grew stricter, heavier. He wanted the company to signify something beyond currency. Albert's practicality became colder. He trusted figures more than individuals. Sam's obsession with innovation intensified. He could sense the future approaching like thunder. And Jack's hunger evolved. At first, Jack wanted attention. Then he wanted credit. Then he wanted control. The others didn't perceive it as peril, not yet. They still regarded Jack as the kid brother, the entertainer, the troublemaker, the one requiring direction. And perhaps that was the oversight. Because Jack didn't want guidance, he wanted a crown. By 1918, the ascent finally broke into sunlight. They incorporated Warner Brothers Pictures and settled in Hollywood, right at the nerve center of the new industry. Harry managed affairs from New York, keeping the business respectable and disciplined. Albert handled distribution and funds, quiet authority. Sam ran technical operations in Los Angeles, shaping the machinery behind the veil. Jack became head of production, the man who determined which stories would be told, which actors would rise, which careers would perish. As on paper, it appeared flawless. 4 brothers, 1 company, 1 promise. But power alters what a promise signifies.